The ship hit the bridge in Baltimore. General Flynn says this is a black swan event. He says black swans normally come out of the world of finance, not of military. The standard operating procedures for all U.S. ports, harbors, and bays that transit commerce and military activities are supposed to maintain an incredible level of discipline, rigor, and awareness for these very type of events that do not occur ever. Yet here we are. There are harbor masters for every single one of these transit points in America that are in charge of assuring the safety of navigation. Start there. So Laura Loomer is saying she talked to people in the intelligence community, and she's saying that this is some kind of terrorist attack. But let's just get into it. Baltimore bridge collapses after powerless cargo ship rams in support column, 6 presumed dead. So here's the video of it, and it's really weird. Watch this video. So the guy makes a hard turn to the right. Now, is that to the starboard side? I'm not sure. I'm not a sailor. But then all the lights go out, and they say, oh, he lost power. But then the lights come back on. And they say he got power back. He also dropped, I think, an anchor or something. Anyway, it looks super suspicious because he hit it dead on. If you were trying to hit it, you couldn't have hit it any more dead center. Put it that way.
Oh my God!
Look at that. And then that thing just fell. Here's a bit.
That's crazy.
I agree. It's a little bit of crazy. Look at that. Not so stable. You'd think it'd be a little more stable than that, but I guess not. That's a pretty big tanker that hit it. So, oh, you can't let her chew on that. So get this. And why doesn't the mayor? I don't know if you saw the mayor of of Baltimore doesn't want us to see they want us to stop watching this and talking about it. Did you hear about that? I should have. Whenever someone insists not to look somewhere, that's all I want to do. It's like, anyway, the company that chartered the cargo. So headline here from The Lever, which is David Sirota, his organization. He's the guy who came on our show and lied that McCarthy could become speaker about forced to vote, and he tried to pretend he was on both sides of it. So he's a bit of a piece of shit himself, but he has a good article. He says feds recently hit cargo giant in Baltimore disaster for silencing whistleblowers. Did you know that? Maybe you didn't. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. The company that chartered the cargo ship that destroyed the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore was recently sanctioned by regulators for blocking its employees from directly reporting safety concerns to the United States Coast Guard in violation of a seaman whistleblower protection law, according to regulatory filings reviewed by The Lever. And you know, Joe Biden completely offered his full support for this seaman whistleblower protection legislation because he was thinking it somehow involved his own testicles, which are now hovering lower than his own approval ratings. 8 months before, a Maersk Line Limited chartered cargo ship crashed into the Baltimore Bridge, likely killing 6 people and injuring others. The Labor Department sanctioned the shipping conglomerate for retaliating against an employee who reported unsafe working conditions aboard a Maersk-operated boat. So it gets everything. It's funny that the whistleblower. Anyway, I don't want. You should always run any observations about corruption past the head of the corrupt organization first. Am I right?
Of course.
Let them take you on a fun hunting trip to sort everything out.
They'll applaud you for that.
That's right.
They'll thank you for drawing their attention to the problem.
In its order, the department found that Maersk had a policy that requires employees to first report their concerns to Maersk. Yeah, that's what you want to do. Prior to reporting it to the Coast Guard or to other authorities. There you go. Yeah, that's what you want to do.
Well, and that requirement is illegal.
Oh.
Not only is it illegal, this article gets into it. I don't know if you have that part. It's also common practice. It's illegal and it's common practice.
Yeah. Well, federal regulators at the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which operates under the Labor Department, called the policy repugnant and a reprehensible and an egregious violation of the rights of employees, which chills them from contacting the Coast Guard or other authorities without contacting the company first. Huh. The fact that we allowed this to become anything more, I mean, Maersk's reporting policy was approved by company executives, federal regulators found in their investigation into the incident. Maersk's vice president of labor relations admits that this reporting policy requiring seamen to report safety concerns to the company and allow it time to abate the conditions before reporting to the Coast Guard or other regulatory agencies, the Labor Department investigators said in their report. Nuts. During their investigation into Maersk, I hope I'm pronouncing this company's name right, federal officials said there was reasonable cause to believe that the company's policy violated the Seamen's Protection Act, which protects maritime workers who speak out about unsafe working conditions. Okay. Officials ordered the company to reinstate the employee and pay over $700,000 in damages and back wages. They also demanded that Maersk revise its policy to allow seamen to contact the Coast Guard about safety concerns before notifying the company. The fired employee was a chief mate on the Saf Marine Mafadi, a Maersk-operated vessel, who also served as a relief captain when needed. The seaman reported unrepaired leaks, unpermitted alcohol consumption on board, inoperable lifeboats, faulty emergency fire suppression equipment, and other admits. So basically, this was a Carnival cruise, then, huh?
No, you need shit floating down the hallways for that.
Before he was fired, the employee was disciplined for not properly maintaining the logbook and failing to properly follow orders. The fired employee told federal regulators that he believed these disciplinary actions were retaliation for reporting alcohol consumption on board the vessel. Really? Of course they're drunk. Of course they are.
I mean, to be fair, that is one of the attractions of the sailor's life, isn't it?
Right? The Seamen's Protection Act was enacted in 1984 to protect maritime workers who reported statutory violations to the Coast Guard from company retaliation. The employees had been left out of other whistleblower laws at the time, and in 2010, the legislation was amended to also safeguard employees who refused to perform certain duties due to fears of personal injury. Enforced by the Occupation Safety and Health Ministry, OSHA, companies that violate the Seamen's Protection Act can be subject to hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. The Coast Guard also encourages employees to report any hazardous condition before it results in a costly mishap. Many maritime employers have a similar policy that prevents employees from directly contacting the Coast Guard, or so that you're, it's like you said, it's regular. This is normal.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, well, so the open sea basically just the Nevada desert in 1968. What happens there stays there unless it washes up somewhere else, I guess. In a blog post, Ryan highlighted a previous whistleblower retaliation case that found it was standard business practice for employers to prohibit any direct contact by employees with government regulatory bodies. It was standard business practice.
Yep.
Standard. Wow. Ryan also highlighted that maritime employees who face many work hazards have a right to report unsafe conditions aboard their vessels. The vessel that crashed into the Baltimore Bridge, the Dolly, was chartered by Maersk and operated by Synergy Marine Group, a ship management company based in Singapore. The ship had a crew of 22 foreign workers from India. The boat is owned by Grace Ocean Private and was headed to Sri Lanka. Yeah, anyone else find it almost surreal that a ship named Dolly makes a bridge become all droopy? Come on. Maersk, which is headquartered in Copenhagen. We're going to be in Copenhagen.
Copenhagen.
Are there tickets available in Copenhagen? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Check it out. It's one of the.
I thought you were doing Berlin. You're not doing Berlin?
We're doing Berlin. Berlin's sold out.
Yeah.
Berlin is sold out. It's one of the world's largest shipping companies, reporting more than $51 billion in revenue in 2023. The company operates in 130 countries and employs 100,000 workers, according to its annual report. Since 2021, Maersk has spent $2.7 million lobbying Congress and federal regulators on workers' compensation, as well as port congestion and infrastructure issues, among other concerns, regulatory filings show. Since last summer, Maersk has been battling the International Longshoremen's Association, a labor union that represents 65,000 maritime workers, including Maersk employees, over labor unrest at the port in Alabama. In August of 2023, APM Terminals, a division of Maersk, sued the union, claiming that workers at its Mobile, Alabama port were on strike illegally during an active contract. The court case is ongoing, and documents filed by the union in March allege that the company illegally suspended 6 workers for raising a concern about a safety issue at the job site. So, Copenhagen sold out. I'm finding out Copenhagen sold out. So if you listen to a guy like General Flynn, he's saying it. I heard him in an interview, so he's calling it a black swan event, and he's saying he's not ruling out anything. You can't rule it out until you do an investigation. But this article suggests very heavily that it's just plain old corruption, like at Boeing, and where they're trying to silence whistleblowers about safety and just bad management. What do you make of this, Russell?
Yeah, when they need to silence you at Boeing, they ask you to have a little conference in the parking lot.
That's right.
They take care of business. You need your anti-Clinton spray when you're working for Boeing. What we're seeing is kind of horseshoe theory played out in infrastructure, because exactly the same problems we always believed and in fact did realize with communism is also what you see in late stage capitalism. I'm sure you remember, Jimmy, during the Cold War. That was always the joke, right? Oh, yes, we don't worry. We bang on spaceship, light come right back on, right? We always joked about how the communists manufactured everything in a slipshod way and held it together with spit and baling wire. In the end, we've arrived right back at the same place. We have trains derailing. We have panels flying off of our planes. We have ships crashing into bridges, which... Look, I'm not an engineer, but I wonder what kind of shape that bridge was in, that it collapsed so totally with that impact on the tower. We know our infrastructure is crumbling nationwide. This is exactly, and to be clear, I'm not a communist, I'm not a Marxist, but Marx was right in his prediction of what late stage capitalism looks like. His prediction was that ultimately the capitalists would consolidate the wealth, and when there was nothing left, they would go after the state. They would eat the means of the state. They would devour the treasury. And that's what you're seeing. We had a period, arguably, from after Theodore Roosevelt through the 50s, about a 50-year period of the growth of the regulatory state, where you had a kind of uneasy balance between the interests of business and public interest. But ultimately, as Marx predicts, as that wealth gets consolidated, it overwhelms the regulatory state. It overwhelms those protections. And that's where we are now. The lever also, I might cover this. They did an article that got under my radar about Boeing a couple months ago. They spent $160 million, I think they said, on stock buybacks and dividends, rather than to put that money into safety measures that they knew they should take, that were recommended to them. Instead, they gave money to the shareholders, because all these companies are just chasing the stock price. They just want to show Wall Street every 3 months at the end of the quarter how much they beat the Wall Street analyst estimates by, and that's all they care about. And when you're getting into these fundamental things like shipping, like planes that are going into the air carrying hundreds of people, it's extremely dangerous. It's deadly.
So that's quite an astute observation that communism and capitalism end up in the same place. So I'm not a Marxist scholar by any means, but
Nor I.
But I'm pretty sure what Marx says is that capitalism eventually eats itself.
Yep.
And so instead of having like we had when I was a kid, we had 50 giant media companies in America, and then they all bought each other, and now we're down to 6. So now,
Right.
So that's not really competition, and then they take over the regulatory agency, well, the government, and so now there's no regulation on it, and it becomes safety goes right out the window, quality goes right out the window, and you're back to exactly what when I was a kid, we made fun of Russia because we had, we had capitalism and competition, which gave us better products, and they didn't because it was all made by the state. So there was no incentive to do better. Well, now it's the same kind of thing. The only incentive is to show a quarterly profit to Wall Street.
That's it.
Go ahead.
Even on a cultural level, you mentioned the consolidation of media. I had never thought about this angle on why music sucks now. There's a producer and musician, Rick Beato. He has a YouTube channel, and he was talking about how it used to be you had all of these local radio stations.
Oh, that's all over. That's all over.
Right. Well, he was talking about how the programming directors would go out to the local clubs to discover bands. So you'd have all these different radio stations and programming directors trying to find the next new thing. And he said back then you might have one programming director to 4 stations, maybe at most. Now you have one programming director for 400 stations.
Yes.
I had never thought of that as an element of what killed music. But it is. And that was part of our analysis of communism too, that you'd have a lack of choice, a lack of culture because the state would dictate a certain kind of form. But you wind up just with some schmuck in an office dictating, okay, this is the music we're going to play.
So I've had some firsthand experience with this. I remember before I was selling tickets, comedy clubs will often have a relationship with local radio stations, and they'll bring on the comedian to promote my shows, so the shows for the weekend. Right. So I remember it was after 9/11, and they were trying to kick Howard Stern off the air, and then I think that you couldn't talk about that. Right. You couldn't talk about that because he was saying dirty things. Right. And then you couldn't talk about 9/11, and you couldn't talk. So there was nothing. And there was only like 2 radio. There was 3. There was like CBS radio, Clear Channel, and I think Infinity, if I'm reminded. And that was it. And so I remember they took me. I was working in Florida. I think it was in West Palm Beach, Florida, at a comedy club. And so they take me to go do radio. Now, normally they would, in a lot of places, they would run you from one radio station to another. You do like 2 or 3 in the morning. They take me to this place, and it has got, I don't know, 30 radio stations inside of this one huge building. And it was like they had the country, they had the hip hop, they had the hard rock, they had the classic rock, they had the easy listening, they had the news, they had the sports, they had every radio station in that market pretty much was in this one building. Wow. And I was like, oh my God. So there was they all worked for the same guy. Right. And so I had the same restrictions on my speech everywhere I went. Right. And of course, all those people were drug tested, which is a great way to run a radio station. And I remember I was doing a show in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I was doing a classic rock station. This is a long time ago, like in the late 90s, before all this consolidation had happened. Right. Or as it was happening. And I was doing a classic rock station. And I said, hey, do they drug test you here? And they go, well, they tried it once. And I go, what happened? He goes, everybody failed. And I said, well, what'd they do? He said, well, they decided they can't do that shit to us anymore.
Right.
So, but that's all gone. That's all over.
Right.
Radio, television, it's all super corporate, super drug tested, super squeaky clean. And
well, we always look at it from the news angle. There have been people who have put together compilations showing different TV stations across the country covering the same story with literally the same words.
That's right.
I never really thought about it from the why is music so formulaic angle. And for anyone who's going to say, no, there's a lot of great music out there. Yeah, okay. But we're talking about the music that gets radio play. We're talking about the music that gets elevated. And it has. There have been musicologists who have sat down and demonstrated this. It's not debatable. It's not a subjective thing. The music you get in those formats is much simpler now. The compositions are
three chords.
It's 3 chords. That's it. And you always had your 3-chord rock, but you also had yes. You also had these very, very advanced compositions within a pop structure. And why did that go away? Yeah, I hadn't thought about that angle. It is partly because of the media consolidation and the fact that there's no real competing markets finding the next new thing. It's just one formulaic, corporate dictated top-down thing, just like we thought of communism. In the end, you wind up with the same thing.
And here we are. And I mean, these are great examples. Boeing, this right here, this shipping accident, the news, radio, I mean, entertainment in general. It's all consolidated. That's it. Somewhere it's all owned by BlackRock. It's pretty
somewhere along the line.
Somewhere along the line, everything is owned by BlackRock and
Vanguard. What BlackRock doesn't own, Vanguard does. Mostly, they both own it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if they both own big stakes in each other's companies. I bet
that would not surprise me.
I would not surprise me.
It would surprise me if they didn't.
Right. Like all these giant companies kind of start owning each other. They buy each other's stock, and so. Anyway, all right. So, if I had to put money on it, I would say this is just late stage capitalism kind of shit happening.
Yes.
Instead of a terrorist attack, because a terrorist attack, I think, would kill more people, or they'd try or something. But I don't know that we won't know until there's a complete investigation, and then of course that investigation will be completely corrupted, and you can't trust it. I bet that. So when you see the head of the shipping company testifying behind closed doors, not under oath, that's when you know there's something up. Just like with 9/11 and George Bush.
Well, when you look at the context, though, it's Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is probably the best. Not always the best. Probably the best. We're in this late stage capitalism hellscape where things are ripping off planes and trains are going off track. It was only a matter of time before you started to see this show up in shipping. And with Boeing, part of the reason I've been on that for so long, and now everybody's on it, thankfully. People have not even begun to think about the implications of one of the only manufacturers of commercial planes being too dangerous to be allowed to continue to put planes in the air. People have not even begun to think about what this is going to do to the global economy, to tourism. It's as soon as a Boeing actually, God forbid, but I unfortunately think it's almost inevitable.
Well, they have already gone down. They have already.
Those Max. Well, they have, and they were grounded for a long time.
Yeah.
Next one that goes down with all of this in the air of now the cat's out of the bag. Now everybody knows that Boeing has been manufacturing unsafe planes. Next one goes down. That's it. They're going to have to ground all of these Boeings, and there are just not going to be enough planes.
There aren't enough planes.
Air travel. Right. You got Airbus. And then you got smaller players who would have to fill the gap, but you can't just do that tomorrow. It takes a long time to build a plane. For that gap to be filled in is going to take years if you take Boeing out of the equation.
Well, the good news is the Boeing CEO, who's been forced to or the chairman of the board to step down, is being given like a $20 million golden parachute.
I'm glad he's going to be okay.
So there's no incentive to these guys not to keep doing what they're doing.
Of course not.
The incentive.
Muhlenberg, the CEO under whom the Maxes crashed, that guy should be in prison for life. No question.
No question about it. But he was given a golden parachute. And so, again, there's no incentive to not cut corners when it comes. There's no incentive to do that. Why Airbus? Has any?
It's a European company.
We have to cross our fingers and hope that Airbus, because I don't know if anybody's doing an investigation into Airbus to see are there whistleblowers being suppressed at Airbus? I don't know. I hope not.
I hope not. All I can say is I've never come across anything like that about Airbus.
Hey, come see us do a live stand-up show. We're going to be in Stockholm, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, London, Oslo, Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, Cortland, New York, Oakmont, Pennsylvania, El Paso, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, Edmonton, Alberta, Vancouver, British Columbia, and Denver, Colorado. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets.